It started with one woman. Just one. Standing in the middle of a street in Strasbourg, France, on a sweltering July morning in 1518. No music. No celebration. No reason anyone could see. She was just dancing. And she couldn't stop. Hi guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. I really hope you're doing well today, wherever you are in the world. Because the story we're diving into tonight, I promise you, is one of those stories that's going to sit with you for a while. It's not a ghost story. It's not a legend. Every single thing I'm about to tell you is documented. It's in historical records, church documents, medical reports, city council minutes. And yet, I still don't fully believe it happened. So before we get into it, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a song stuck in your head so badly that you couldn't stop moving to it? Like your foot just keeps tapping, your body just keeps swaying, even when you're trying to sit still? Now imagine that. But you can't stop. Not for an hour. Not for a day. Not for a week. And people around you are starting to die. That is what happened in Strasbourg in the summer of 1518. This is the story of the dancing plague. Let's get into it. Okay guys. So before I take you to that street corner in Strasbourg where it all began, I need to paint a picture of what life actually looked like in early 16th century Europe. Because context matters here. And once you understand what these people were living through, what happened next starts to make a terrifying kind of sense. So, 1518, Strasbourg. Today Strasbourg is this beautiful, charming city right on the border of France and Germany. People visit it for the Christmas markets, the Gothic cathedral, the canals. It's lovely. But in 1518, guys, it was a completely different world. This was the Holy Roman Empire. Strasbourg was a bustling trading city, important, populated, connected to major routes across Europe. But it was also a city under enormous pressure. And I mean that in every sense of the word. Think about what was happening across Europe at this time. The continent had spent the last 150 years being absolutely battered. The Black Death, that pandemic I talked about before, had wiped out somewhere between a third and half of Europe's population in the previous century. And even though the worst of it had passed, plague still came back. Again and again. In waves. People in 1518 had grown up knowing that disease could take entire neighborhoods in a matter of days. That death wasn't something that happened to old people peacefully in bed. It was something that could walk up to your door at any moment. On top of that, the harvests had been failing. Repeatedly. The years leading up to 1518 were marked by famine across the region. People were hungry. Genuinely, desperately hungry. Not skipped lunch hungry. Haven't eaten properly in weeks hungry. The kind of hunger that starts to change how your brain works. How your body works. And then there was the smallpox. And syphilis, which had spread across Europe like wildfire in the decades before. And floods. And economic strain. And social tensions between the wealthy merchant class and the ordinary working people who could barely afford to survive. So picture that. You're an ordinary person living in Strasbourg in 1518. You are exhausted. You are scared. You are underfed. The world around you feels like it is slowly falling apart and there is nothing you can do about it. Now hold that image. We're going to come back to it. Because on a specific day in July 1518, historians believe it was around mid-July, though the exact date is debated, a woman named Frau Troffea stepped out of her house on a narrow street in Strasbourg. And she started to dance. Now, we don't know a lot about Frau Troffea personally, guys. History didn't preserve her full story the way it would for someone wealthy or powerful. But we know she existed. We know her name. And we know what she did. She danced in the street. By herself. Without music. At first, people probably just stared. Maybe thought she'd lost her mind, or was having some kind of episode. Maybe someone went to get her husband. Maybe neighbors watched from doorways, unsure whether to laugh or to worry. But here's the thing. She didn't stop. She kept dancing. Through the afternoon. Into the evening. Through the night. By the next morning, Frau Troffea was still moving. Her feet, by this point, were almost certainly bleeding. The cobblestones of Strasbourg's streets were not smooth. They were rough and uneven, and she had been moving across them for hours. Her body must have been in agony. And yet she couldn't stop. By the end of the first week, guys, 1 week of this woman dancing without rest, she had been joined by others. Not one or two. Dozens. People who had come to watch her, or who had simply walked past, and had themselves started dancing. Uncontrollably. Against their will. Within a month, the number of dancers had grown to somewhere between 50 and 400 people. Depending on which historical account you read. And people were starting to die. Not from violence. Not from illness in any traditional sense. From sheer physical exhaustion. Their hearts gave out. Their bodies simply couldn't sustain the movement any longer. And no one, not the city officials, not the doctors, not the priests, had any idea what to do. Now this is the part that gets me every single time, guys. Because you'd think, right, that the immediate response would be to try to stop them. To restrain the dancers. To keep them off the streets and get them somewhere safe so they could rest. But that is not what happened. And the reason it didn't happen is fascinating and horrifying in equal measure. The physicians of Strasbourg, the actual medical doctors, educated men by the standards of the time, examined the dancers and came to a conclusion. They declared that the dancing plague was caused by hot blood. A natural medical condition. Not supernatural, not demonic. Medical. Which sounds more rational, right? Except their solution, based on that diagnosis, was to encourage the dancers. Let me say that again. The doctors said, let them dance it out. Their reasoning was that if the dancing was caused by overheated blood, then the cure was to allow the blood to work through the system. To let the dancers exhaust the condition naturally. And so the City Council of Strasbourg, these were the actual governing authorities of the city, guys, this is in the official records, they hired musicians. They brought in professional drummers and pipers. They cleared 2 large spaces in the city, the Guild Hall and the Horse Fair Market, and they turned them into dedicated dancing venues. They even hired strong men, paid chaperones, to keep the dancers moving and upright when they started to falter. Guys. They built a dance floor. For a plague. And predictably, catastrophically, it made everything worse. With music now driving them, with a structured space, with people literally being held up so they could keep going, the dancing spread faster. More people joined. The death toll climbed. People were collapsing from strokes, from heart failure, from dehydration. Some reportedly danced until their feet were nothing but raw, bleeding wounds and still couldn't stop. The Guildhall that had been cleared for them became less like a dance venue and more like a slow-moving catastrophe. Loud, chaotic, full of people moving in a kind of frenzied horror, their faces not showing joy, witnesses described them as anguished. Some wept while they danced. Some screamed. Some reportedly called out for help, for someone to make it stop, even as their bodies refused to obey them. This was not celebration. This was suffering. Now by August, guys, the city had started to panic in a different way. Because the let them dance it out strategy had clearly, visibly, undeniably failed. People were dying. The streets were full of involuntary dancers. Normal life in Strasbourg had essentially ground to a halt because everywhere you went there were these people, neighbors, family members, strangers, jerking and spinning and stumbling and unable to stop. So the city council changed course. They reversed their position completely. Banned the music. Shut down the dancing venues. And now pivoted to the opposite theory, that the dancing was not medical at all. That it was divine punishment. A curse. Specifically, they decided it was the curse of Saint Vitus, a Christian martyr whose name had long been associated with neurological and movement disorders in European folk tradition. So what's the cure for a saint's curse? A pilgrimage to that saint's shrine. The dancers, exhausted, bleeding, some of them barely conscious, were loaded into carts and wagons. They were taken on a journey to the shrine of Saint Vitus, located in a mountain chapel about a day's travel from Strasbourg. There, religious ceremonies were performed over them. They were made to wear red shoes, red specifically, for reasons that historians still debate, possibly to symbolize the blood of the saint or to invoke protective symbolism. Priests prayed over them. Rituals were performed. And then, the accounts say, it stopped. By September of 1518, the dancing plague of Strasbourg had ended almost as abruptly as it began. The dancers recovered. The city went back to some version of normal. And Frau Troffea, the woman who started it all, disappears from the historical record entirely. We don't know what happened to her. Whether she survived. Whether she ever danced again. She just vanishes. But here's where it gets really strange, guys. And this is the part one genuinely cannot stop thinking about. Because once historians and scientists started seriously studying this event, and they have, extensively, over the past few decades, they ran into a problem. Nobody could explain it. And I don't mean it's a little confusing. I mean that some of the most serious researchers in neurology, psychology, history, and epidemiology have looked at the dancing plague of 1518 and walked away without a definitive answer. Because none of the explanations fully fit. Let's go through the main theories. Because this is where it gets genuinely fascinating. Theory 1. Ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus. It grows on rye and other grains, especially in damp conditions. And if you eat grain contaminated with ergot, it can cause hallucinations, convulsions, a burning sensation in the limbs. Historically, this was called St. Anthony's fire, and in severe cases, uncontrolled muscle spasms. It was also the basis for LSD, if that tells you anything about what it does to your brain. Now, remember what I told you about the failed harvests in the years before 1518? Spoiled, damp grain was everywhere. People were eating whatever they could get. The conditions for ergot contamination were practically perfect. And this theory, ergotism as the cause of the dancing plague, has some real traction. It could explain the convulsive, uncontrolled movement. It could explain why it spread through a community that shared the same food supply. But there's a problem. Ergot poisoning doesn't typically produce coordinated dancing. It produces spasms, yes. Writhing, yes. But witnesses to the dancing plague specifically describe the dancers as dancing. Moving in recognizable patterns. Not just convulsing randomly. And ergot poisoning tends to affect the vascular system and can cause burning sensations and gangrene. But the dancers of 1518 didn't reportedly show those particular symptoms. So ergot might be part of the picture. But it's probably not the whole answer. Theory 2. Mass psychogenic illness. This one, guys, is the theory that most modern researchers lean toward. And it's the one I find simultaneously the most believable and the most mind-bending. Mass psychogenic illness, you might also hear it called mass hysteria, though that term has fallen out of favor, is a real, documented, medically recognized phenomenon. It's what happens when stress, anxiety, and psychological tension in a community become so extreme that they start to express themselves as physical symptoms. And those symptoms spread from person to person not through bacteria or viruses but through the same mechanism that makes you yawn when you see someone else yawn. Through shared experience. Through suggestion. Through fear. And here's the key thing about mass psychogenic illness. It tends to target communities that are already under extreme pressure. Communities that have been through trauma. Communities that feel trapped, that feel hopeless, that have no other outlet for what they're experiencing. Sound familiar? The people of Strasbourg in 1518 had been through famine, through plague, through years of hardship with no end in sight. They were, in a very real sense, at breaking point. And in that context, the theory goes, when one person began to dance, something in the community's collective psychology latched onto it. Not consciously. Not on purpose. But deeply, physically, in a way that bypassed rational thought entirely. This theory also explains something that the ergot theory struggles to account for: why the dancing got worse when the city council brought in musicians and created formal dancing spaces. Because if this was psychogenic in nature, if it was spreading through social contagion, then publicly legitimizing it, creating an audience for it, normalizing it as a thing that happens in your city, would be exactly the kind of thing that accelerates it. You are essentially telling the vulnerable, stressed out, traumatized population of your city, this is real, this is happening, watch out because you might be next. Which is about the least helpful thing you could possibly do. Theory 3. Religious ecstatic trance. Some historians have pointed to a tradition in medieval Christianity of ecstatic dancing as religious experience. There were actually documented groups, sometimes called dance flagellants, who danced as a form of spiritual practice or penitence. Usually in specific religious contexts, usually with intent behind it. The theory here is that the line between intentional ecstatic religious dancing and what happened in Strasbourg in 1518 might not be as clear as it seems. That some kind of community-wide trance state, triggered by religious anxiety, could have produced mass involuntary movement. This theory is less widely accepted than the psychogenic illness explanation, but it adds an interesting layer. Because it reminds us that in 1518, the boundary between spiritual experience and physical symptom was almost non-existent in how people understood their own bodies. If you felt something unusual happening to you, you interpreted it through a religious lens first. Always. Which brings us back to the city's decision to send the dancers to St. Vitus's shrine. Because whatever we think of the theology behind it, that pilgrimage, that act of giving people a narrative, a destination, a ritual, a resolution, may actually have been the most psychologically effective intervention the city made. Not because St. Vitus actually cursed them, but because giving people a story that ends, giving them a ceremony that closes the chapter, may have been exactly what their overwhelmed minds needed to let go. Now guys, I want to pause here and zoom out for a second. Because the dancing plague of 1518 is remarkable not just as a historical curiosity. It tells us something genuinely important about what human beings are. We are social creatures in a way that goes far deeper than we usually acknowledge. Our bodies, not just our minds, our actual physical bodies, respond to the people around us. To the emotional state of our communities. To shared stress. To shared fear. To shared belief. And when that shared stress reaches a certain point, when a community has been pushed beyond what it can consciously process, the body finds its own way to speak. Sometimes that looks like illness. Sometimes it looks like grief. And apparently, sometimes, in a specific place, at a specific moment in history, when hundreds of exhausted, frightened, starving people were pushed past their breaking point, it looked like dancing. That is not a comforting thought, guys. It's actually kind of a terrifying one. Because it means that the line between our rational, controlled, intentional self and something much more primal, something that can take over your body and move it without your permission, is maybe not as thick as we'd like to believe. The dancers of 1518 didn't choose what happened to them. They didn't fake it. They weren't performing. They were experiencing something real. Something that killed some of them. And they couldn't make it stop. There's one more thing I want to mention before we wrap up, guys. Because the dancing plague of Strasbourg wasn't actually unique. This surprises a lot of people. But there are records of similar dancing outbreaks going back as far as the 14th century in Europe. 1374, so more than 100 years before the Strasbourg event, there were reports of mass dancing outbreaks along the Rhine and Moselle rivers in Germany and the Netherlands. Groups of people, sometimes hundreds at a time, dancing compulsively through the streets of multiple cities, crossing town borders, moving from community to community. There's another recorded outbreak in 1428, one in 1463, one in 1518, which is the one we've been talking about today, and a few smaller incidents scattered across the 15th and 16th centuries. And then, guys, they stopped. After the early 1500s, recorded outbreaks of dancing plague essentially disappear from European history. No more mass dancing events. Nothing on the scale of Strasbourg again. Why? Researchers think it comes down to a few things. The religious and social frameworks that made dancing plague possible, the intense belief in saints' curses, the specific kind of community psychological vulnerability, the particular combination of famine and plague and powerlessness, gradually shifted as Europe moved through the Reformation and into the modern period. The exact conditions that allowed something like this to take root and spread simply stopped existing in the same way. Which is both reassuring and a little unsettling. Reassuring because it suggests we probably don't need to worry about a dancing plague breaking out in a city near you anytime soon. Unsettling because it suggests the conditions for it were very specific, and the conditions for other kinds of mass psychogenic events, in our own time, with our own particular stresses and anxieties and social contagion mechanisms, might not be as far away as we'd like to think. We don't dance in the streets uncontrollably anymore. But we do have the internet. I'll leave that one with you. So, Frau Troffea. One woman. One July morning in Strasbourg. She stepped outside and started to dance. By the time it was over, hundreds of people had joined her. Some of them died. None of them chose it. And 500 years later, sitting here telling you this story, I still genuinely don't know what happened to them. The ergot didn't fully explain it. The psychogenic theory gets closest, but even that leaves gaps. The shrine of Saint Vitus somehow helped end it, whether through divine intervention, as the people of 1518 believed, or through the psychological power of ritual and narrative, as modern researchers tend to think. What I keep coming back to, guys, is this. These were ordinary people. They weren't strange or weak or uniquely vulnerable in any way that separated them from us. They were just people who had been through too much, for too long, with too little relief. And their bodies found a way to say so that the world has never been able to fully explain. I think there's something worth sitting with in that. No matter how modern we are. No matter how much we understand about science and medicine and psychology. The human body, the human mind, still holds things we haven't fully mapped. Still responds to things we can't fully measure. And occasionally, it reminds us of that in ways we absolutely did not see coming. Like a woman dancing alone in the street. In July. In Strasbourg. In 1518. Who couldn't stop? Okay, guys. That is the story of the dancing plague of 1518. What do you think? Does the mass psychogenic illness theory make sense to you? Or do you think there's something else going on here that we still haven't figured out? Let me know in the comments. I genuinely want to know where you land on this one. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. It genuinely helps more than you know. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? Subscribe. There's so much more where this came from. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, guys. Bye.